Marc Freedman has a purpose. As managing partner and co-founder of Evolved Profits, he and his team have over 40 years of experience in helping businesses free up cash so that it can be reinvested into helping employees, growing the business, and creating positive social impact. He is a serial entrepreneur, CEO, and the best-selling author of Expense to Profit: Eliminate the Costs That Sabotage Your Growth. Marc loves helping companies create more profits while being an agent for change. This is his purpose, and in an effort to help more companies and more people, Marc, along with co-host Yanik Silver, author of Evolved Enterprise, bring you Profits with Purpose, a podcast that aims to do just that. On the show, Marc and Yanik talk to successful corporate decision makers, exploring valuable lessons learned, experiences in growing a company, ways to reduce expenses, and all the ways a company can have a positive social impact. Join us each week and get in on the discussion so we can all have more profits with purpose. And now, here's your host, Marc Freedman.
Welcome to Profit with Purpose. Today's guest is David Wentzloff. He is the co-founder and chief technology officer, or Everactive. Everactive has been at the forefront of environmentally responsible high-tech batteryless solutions. Remember that, battery tech-less solutions. Ushering the fourth industrial revolution into the greenest way possible. This technology can mean a more sustainable world for businesses and consumers in the near future. David's also a professor of electrical engineering and computer science at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. I was just about 3 weeks ago in your competitions area. I was in Lansing. His research focuses on RF integrated circuits with an emphasis on ultra-low power design. David, welcome to Profits with Purpose.
Thank you, Marc. It's great to be here.
So let's talk about, you have a lot of accolades, and we could go on for about 5 more minutes, I think, on those. But I don't know if there's any that you specifically think are more meaningful in your life than others that actually helped your background and how you ended up in engineering and technology. Fill us in.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we could skip the accolades part. That's fine. You absolutely do not have to read my bio. I will say one thing, probably the thing that I'm most proud of, and shout out to the HKN chapter at University of Michigan, is the Professor of the Year Awards. I did win that twice, and that was voted on by students. And it's always great when, you get feedback from students or good feedback from students. So it's good to hear.
Yeah, but, I think that's almost like better than a peer award, right?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Because you're transferring value, informational value, to people who believe the information you're giving is actually of value. So that's kind of cute. Yeah, congratulations there.
Yep. Yeah, so those are always fun. So, and that is our mission at the university, is to train the next generation. So it's good to get those feedbacks. But what got me, maybe to sum it up quickly, what got me started in electrical engineering, I say that started for me at a really young age. I was always taking stuff apart. I was the kid who was disassembling the broken stuff. And back then when the VCR would break down, I would want to open it up and see, what spun the tapes and things like that, and could never get it back together the way it was when I took it apart. So I knew I wasn't going to be a mechanical engineer, but I got really interested in the electrical system. So that's really where it got started for me, and also had an interest in business back then. And so, kind of shelved that for a bit while I pursued the electrical engineering career path, and eventually got interested in teaching and research, and went on to go get the PhD, and then came back as a professor at the University of Michigan in 2007. And it wasn't until then when we started working on things that we could actually see a path to commercialization of that research. So. And maybe I'll talk more about that perhaps when we get to more of the founding story of Everactive. But yeah, it wasn't really until later in my, after I had started as a professor, that I started to get more interested in business and entrepreneurship again, and commercializing that technology. So, but then, to your earlier question, kind of, what maybe one of the things that I take the most pride in is the translation of that research to something that we are implementing and pushing out into the world. I take a lot of pride in that, because quite often for research in universities, it gets conducted in a lab, it gets published in a conference, that student graduates and joins a big company, and then sometimes you never hear from that research again, or maybe it continues in the group in the university, but it seems to me more often than not, that kind of the end point of that particular technology's path. And what we're doing is we're commercializing the research that was done in my group at Michigan, as well as my co-founder's group at the University of Virginia. His name's Ben Calhoun. And so the two of us have been collaborating for a long time now, and it's commercializing that technology, which, is, for one thing, is kind of seeing what we've done in the research labs actually grow legs and, get out into the world and do some very useful things. But then the second part of that is what's possible with that technology. We really do feel like what we are doing can revolutionize compute, across the entire globe, can revolutionize how we do computing. And I'll refer to it as the batteryless era. I'm sure we'll talk about batteries a little bit later too, but I'll refer to this as the batteryless era. We've enjoyed these very rich technology development eras of, let's call it compute, which was the heyday of Moore's law scaling. That was back when you had to go to Best Buy or Circuit City and get your computer, right? But by the time you unloaded it from your car and plugged it into the wall, it was already outdated. There was already a faster one available. Right. And that was the heyday of Moore's law scaling. And then wireless came around, Wi-Fi came around, wireless came around. Remember, there was these dongles you could plug into your laptop, and all of a sudden you had Wi-Fi in your laptop. And then all of a sudden it was integrated in, from the beginning. And then obviously mobile, and then IoT, today's IoT, which is, let's say, the wearables, or like Nest thermostats, Fitbits, things like that, those things run on batteries. And those batteries are a key limitation to the ability to scale those devices. You'll buy 10 or maybe 50 battery operated IoT devices for your house, but you won't buy 5,000. You'll never buy 5,000 battery operated devices for your house if you've got to go back and change 5,000 batteries in a year. No one's going to do that. And no one's going to do that for a factory or an office building, or you name it. It's a huge limitation. And so again, back to your original question, I take a lot of pride in, that technology spinning out of the university and seeing it grow those legs and, wings and take off, but then also the opportunities that are out there for us to go after and really revolutionize computing.
Pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about your two careers, right? What's the difference between teaching classes and founding and running a company?
Gosh, comparing those is difficult. I will tell you this, running a research group is a lot like, there's a lot of similarities to starting a company, because when you're running a research group, you're recruiting students to that group. You're pitching your ideas to sponsors to get funding for your research. You're presenting it in a way that, other people can understand the importance of what you're doing, to get it published, to publish those results. And so there's a lot of similarity, and you're always, you have a cash out date, right? As a research group, it's a continuous, you're always looking for sponsors to sponsor your research. So it's, there are a lot of similarities there. Teaching classes, that's a harder question. I'd say the one thing there is is putting out fires. You're always putting out fires in a startup. You're always putting out fires when you're teaching classes, because there's always some situation you've got to deal with a student, or something that's going on. So I'd say there's some similarities there, but those, from my experience, those two things are kind of worlds apart.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your applications at Everactive and what I believe are large ramifications for the environment based on what I've seen.
Yeah.
So I don't know the deep research behind it. I see what what you've got out there.
Yeah.
And I guess my question was, were you always interested, as an environmentalist, or is that something that the research then brought to light, the opportunity, and that propelled where you went, and then being able to commercialize that research?
Yeah. So, okay, a few questions in there. Maybe I'll start with the latter. Was I always an environmentalist? I'd say we have always focused on reducing power consumption. That is from day one in my PhD, that research, to a professor, to then, continuing that research in the group, but also Everactive. It's always been about reducing power consumption. So I'd say that's been from day one. And when Ben and I, my co-founder, Ben at the University of Virginia, when he and I were looking at applications where we could apply this technology in the research environment, we started by looking at healthcare. How can we apply low power technology to healthcare applications? And that's where we saw we could power from things like body heat or perhaps body motion and remove the battery. So that's where things start to get, from an environmental perspective, that's where things now get a little more exciting. Is, okay, we've managed to reduce the power, not by 10% or 15%, by 1,000x.
Wow.
So we've managed to reduce the power by 1,000x based on our work. And what that allows us to do is do a significant amount of compute, communication, sensing, you name it, a significant amount of work on a very small amount of energy. And that opens the doors for removing the battery. So that's where I got excited about that, for sure. And then back to the first part of your question, the applications. So as with any startup, there's a journey, and I just told you about basically physiological monitors that could power from body heat. And that is the point that we had got to in research. This was about 2012, where we decided maybe it's time to commercialize this technology and start a company to do so. And at that time, when we started the company, we started looking at healthcare and physiological monitors and wearables. And we quickly learned that we didn't want to go into healthcare because of the long road. And we chose industrial, which also has a long road to adoption. So I'm not sure we did much better there in terms of timing, but the applications are enormous inside the industrial space. So it wasn't until, we started that journey and started looking for what are some of the, applications that we could go after with this technology, that we then got into the steam trap monitor and the machine health monitor applications, which are our first two products.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want, I can pause there. If you want, I can go into some details on what those are, but maybe pause for a sec, see if you have any other follow-ups.
Yeah, no, I was just, obviously, everybody can go to the website and see all the technology, and it's pretty well explained there. If we've got some time, maybe we'll come back to it. But
Sure.
Let's talk about, so I always wonder, I know you're a professor, you both are professors, both co-founders, and I don't know if I have this right or whether or not it's a misconception, but I was under the impression that when you are at a university and you get grant money, that the university actually controls the out product of the R&D.
Yeah.
Is that correct? That's incorrect? Or
well, by out product, I think you mean IP?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So depends on the sponsor, first of all. And it depends on the arrangements that the university has negotiated with that sponsor.
Got it.
I'll give you a couple examples. NSF, National Science Foundation, one of their primary missions is education in the US. And so they have, for any research that they fund, they have little to no kind of, quote, strings attached, if you will, to the new inventions that come out of that research. They obviously want to know about it through reporting,
Sure.
And I'm sure they keep track of all of those things. So the university does report all of that to, for example, NSF. However, the university, if some new invention comes out of that research funded by NSF, the university can file for a patent to protect that IP. Mm-hmm. And then the university owns that patent. So I, as a faculty member, will assign my rights to U of M, and they own the patent. the university can then license the patent, or I suppose sell it, but they can license the patent to anyone they want.
Sure.
So Everactive is licensing IP from the University of Michigan and the University of Virginia from some of the research that we conducted in our groups there. The other example would be with when a sponsor is a company. Sometimes when companies sponsor research, they don't, that whole path I just described
Sure. Yeah.
means, hey, wait a minute, I could fund some research and then you could license this to my competitor. And so, yeah.
Yeah, not so much, right?
Yeah. Those tend to come with, let's say, more quote strings attached, but it's usually not too onerous. Everyone knows the mission of a university is not, to make a profit. It's not to go build a huge business. And, it's we're nonprofits and we're in the business of education.
Right.
And so, so this is, usually the university just functions as this IP, I don't know, call it middleman, if you will.
Got it.
Yeah. Then licenses the IP out.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's now talk about Everactive a little bit, and
Sure.
let's talk about the culture. How many people you have? What's the culture like? Because you guys are coming from really different backgrounds, and how you instill the right culture into a business that started in a university and is now in the commercial space.
Yeah, great question. I love it. Right. So how many people? We're about 120 at the moment. And we, like I said, we started in 2012, but raised our Series A in 2014. And that was when we hired our first full-time employee, and have grown now to, like I said, about 120. And as far as culture goes, we take culture very seriously. Actually, from early on in Everactive, we took it upon ourselves to kind of analyze the culture in the company, but then go develop a culture document and culture statement for the company to, kind of act as guiding principles, or kind of to put down on paper how we want the culture of the company to be. One of the things that I really appreciate that our founding CEO told Ben and I a long time ago, when we first started, was, don't think of this as like building a big company like an Apple or a Google or an Intel. Think of this like building, a big company that you can shape in a way that, you would want to work at, so you can kind of guide this company any direction you want. And it's not like you have to make it go look like Intel or I'm just picking names here. I'm not,
sure. I
not saying anything bad about any of these companies. Just, you don't have to copy, cookie cutter any kind of anything from any of these other companies. You can make it whatever you want. And we really took that to heart. And so, inside the company, I'd say one thing that defines us is transparency. We're very transparent with all of our employees on everything that's going on within the company. So, and having seen that in other small companies, not having seen the opposite of that in other small companies, I know that it's a very important thing, I think, to have in a small company in particular. Mm-hmm. So that's one. I think another is yes, we are a very innovative company. We have a lot of PhDs in the company. We have a lot of, former students from our groups, but other PhDs as well. And so we have like a intellectual honesty there, where we try and guard against paralysis, analysis paralysis, right? But at the same time, it's okay to question things. It's okay to, well, why are we doing this? Can you explain the reasoning behind a certain decision? And quite often, we will have processes to have all of that documented and very clear and open and transparent as to why we made certain decisions. But in cases where we don't, it's okay to question those things and apply this intellectual honesty to really any decisions throughout the company. And then, we've developed a number of other essentially culture statements that help guide, again, how we operate inside the company, but it's something we take really seriously.
Cool. So our business, we put a big focus on positive social impact.
Yeah.
Are there ways that you're promoting positive social impact within the company itself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we plays on the word Everactive. So we have Everactivism days.
Okay.
Our next one's in a couple weeks, I think. I want to say 3 weeks or 2 weeks from Friday, I want to say. But yeah, we have three sites: Ann Arbor, Charlottesville, and Santa Clara. And in all three sites, we will organize Everactivism activities for the day, where everyone will basically plow all meetings for that day. We'll go and organize. We'll go and participate in some volunteer activity together. So that's one thing. We also have, let's say, charitable donations within the company. So we have a committee that oversees local charitable contributions that the company can make. We do that. We are a startup. We're venture funded, so we do that on a small scale, but we want to set the precedent there. Internally, we'll have, we will recognize, things like Black History Month, let's say all these different cultural aspects of different members of our own employees, or just, sort of beyond the Everactive walls. We'll get guest presenters that come in, give talks to the entire organization, or we'll have individual employees share their life journey, their life story with the whole company. And that has been really enlightening, really rewarding, I think, just to hear employees talk about, how they got to where they got. And then, like we talked about already with the products that we're deploying, we think those can make a huge environmental impact.
Sure.
Just based on the amount of CO2, emissions that we can save, or the amount of natural resources that don't have to get spent by, keeping these assets in good working order.
Great. So as a professor, you're dealing with a lot of younger generations.
Yeah.
Do you see a larger interest in social impact with our youth?
Oh, yeah.
Are there ways that you promote and get them interested and emphasize certain social impact opportunities with them?
Oh, gosh. Your first statement is spot on. What I find is you don't have to get them interested. They're trying to bring us along. We're trying to keep up with the younger generation. So that, at least been my experience, is yes, there's a lot of interest there. I am also the faculty director of the Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan, and through the CFE, abbreviated CFE, through that center, we have started a number of, call them environmentally conscious or socially conscious programs that students can participate in, and we see a lot of interest in those. The most recent one was on carbon reduction, CO2 reduction, I should say.
Shocker there. No, not really.
Huh?
I said shocker there, but no.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. But there's reducing CO2 emissions, but then there's also absorbing CO2. Are there technologies that can essentially do the same thing plants do?
Right.
Try and reverse.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like the
Try and
scrubbing.
reverse.
Yep. Interesting. So this is a good question. I love this question. What's the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
Oh my gosh, the best piece of advice. I think, I'd probably want to think about that for a little bit, but the thing that came to my mind first was, don't try to be somebody that don't pretend to be somebody that you're not. It's, recognize self-awareness, in other words. Recognize where your skills are, recognize what you're good at, recognize how you act, how you talk, how you behave. And if you always operate within, like if you always essentially be yourself, if you operate within those parameters, you find it's much easier. Things come a lot easier. Meaning if you're very good at painting, right, but you really want to be a musician, well, you're going to have to work really hard at being the musician. But if you just painted, you could do it in your sleep. That's probably the best analogy I could come up with. So, I think the best advice I've gotten is on self-awareness. Be yourself, be true to yourself, and don't pretend, because eventually it's a lot of work, it's a lot of extra work, it's unnecessary, or it catches up to you.
Eventually, correct. Well, pretty cool. Is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you want to touch on?
We didn't talk too much about the batteryless revolution, but one thing I would just plant with all your listeners is if you envision a world, well, let me back up. The IoT is expected to hit 1 trillion devices at some point, probably in our lifetimes, to hit 1 trillion devices. But if you assume that each one of those devices has a 3-year battery lifetime, so 1 trillion devices, each one has a 3-year battery lifetime. And by the way, how many things do you own today have a 3-year battery lifetime?
Probably almost all of them.
All of them, but not your phone, not your watch.
So it for sure doesn't have a 3-year life with full capacity.
That's what I mean.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean though. So a 3-year lifetime from one charge.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
One charge doesn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. So if each one of those devices had a 3-year lifetime from one charge, then you would be recharging or replacing 1 billion batteries a day, 1 billion batteries per day across the planet. So in other words, 1 trillion is a huge, huge number. And, if you think about a world where there are 1 trillion of these things out there, and we're recharging or replacing batteries 1 billion times a day, that is probably a world that you and I don't want to live in, where we're producing that much waste in terms of batteries. So in order, I would say in order to enable a world like that, something has to change. Something's got to change. We are not going to get there, or we should not get there based on current technology. And I think that is where this sort of batteryless compute revolution, I think, is going to have to take place. Whether we lead it or somebody else, it's got to happen in order to enable this world of 1 trillion IoT devices. And why is that so important? Well, there's a couple use cases that we're going after with steam trap monitoring and machine health monitoring, where we can dramatically reduce carbon emissions in these factories by maintaining these assets and keeping them running, smoothly, correctly. There are thousands, millions of other applications where IoT could be applied to do the same thing. Not just improve efficiency, but improve performance, improve, energy efficiency, improve carbon emissions, improve the environment. So I think there's a whole world of applications out there. We're only going to get there if we can remove the batteries.
Yeah. Look, I've got a Tesla. I've got multiple Apple devices, as does everybody in my family.
Yeah.
So, and they're all battery.
Yeah, they're all battery.
And we know actually the reason why we've seen a depreciation in value of a lot of these companies that are EVs is because they can't get the batteries. So if you can't get the batteries, and that's what you base your business on, you got to find it. You got to find some other solution. No,
that's right. Yep, that's right.
Wow. Cool. So cool. Well, this has been wonderful. This is really pretty insightful. Where can listeners go to learn more about both the company and yourself? And of course, we'll add that to the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can certainly check out our website, everactive.com. You can also find us on different social media platforms, LinkedIn and Twitter, for example. So, but yeah, feel free to reach out to us there. If you have other questions, there's a way for you to contact us through the website. It's probably the best channel to get a hold of us. So, would love to hear from anyone who's got new applications, new ideas, for batteryless technology.
Wow, pretty cool. David, thank you so much for joining us on Profits with Purpose. Truly a business that's fulfilling that name.
Thank you, Marc. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Profits with Purpose. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you are interested in reducing the expenses of your business, creating positive social impact, or contributing to the show, reach out to Marc or Yanik with Evolved Profits by emailing podcast@evolvedprofits.com or visiting the website www.evolvedprofits.com.